123.7 million tons. This is the amount of carbon emissions that Korea needs to reduce in the field of power generation and conversion by 2030. Considering that the standard 2018 emissions were 269.6 million tons, the reduction rate is 45.9%, which is quite burdensome. To reduce carbon emissions in the power generation sector centered on coal or liquefied natural gas (LNG) in Korea, the implementation of hydrogen or ammonia into thermal power generation is being discussed. In addition, increasing the use of nuclear power, which had fallen in utilization rate under the previous administration, is also being considered. However, some people point out that the amount of renewable energy generation should be drastically increased. Due to Korea's small territory, it is challenging to introduce solar and onshore wind power widely. Offshore wind power can help solve this situation. Since offshore wind power generation is not built on land, it has relatively small impact on biological groups and rather has the effect of increasing marine fish stocks. Although it has the disadvantage of generating power far from residences, it is the best option for renewable energy generation for Korea, which has competitive advantages starting from electric wires all the way down to steel structures. Mail Business newspaper met with Jesper Holst, the global vice chairman of Copenhagen Offshore Partners (COP), a global offshore wind farm builder. COP is planning to start construction of a fixed offshore wind power plant in Jeonnam province this year, one of the largest offshore wind projects in Korea, and is pushing to build a floating offshore wind farm in Ulsan, South Korea. Through the interview, we were able to find out about the overall situation regarding Korea's offshore wind potential and current development progress. The Korean government is also promoting offshore wind power generation. What do you think is the reason for this? Korea is a country that imports about 95% of its energy. Denmark, where the COP headquarters are located, experienced a similar situation, which caused the economy to shrink significantly during the oil crisis. Energy imports are the same as giving money away to other countries. Holst said creating an offshore wind farm would also help achieve energy independence and foster related supply chain companies, creating thousands of jobs. He also introduced the case of Taiwan, which is adjacent to Korea. Compared to Korea, Taiwan's offshore wind power generation complex was built earlier. Construction started in 2016 because TSMC, a Taiwanese semiconductor company, asked the Taiwanese government to supply them with renewable energy. He said Taiwan can be characterized by its focus on rapidly supplying renewable energy. Taiwan actively encouraged foreign companies such as COP to participate because the operation of offshore wind power would have been delayed if it were done by domestic companies. Since 2010, Korea has set up a 2.5 gigawatt power generation plant on the southwest coast, but actually building it took a long time. What are your thoughts on concerns that the unit price of offshore wind power is still higher than that of existing methods? Vice Chairman Holst believes that grid parity, which means the unit price of offshore wind power generation becoming similar to that of existing power generation, is not far away. It is said that economies of scale are needed for this to happen. If offshore wind power plants of 3 to 4 gigawatt are built every year, the unit price will drop significantly and it would be possible to achieve grid parity before 2030. However, for this to happen, the Korean government's declaration of full expansion of wind power is necessary. Korea does not yet have a high proportion of renewable energy generation. What's your opinion on this? It is said that there is no better alternative than offshore wind power for large-scale renewable energy supply. This is because it can reduce the impact on residents compared to onshore solar and onshore wind power, and the unit price of power generation is cheaper. The use of nuclear power plants by the Korean government is also important, but expanding wind power is essential to meet the global trend of RE100. Offshore wind power is built in two main ways: floating types at sea and fixed types at sea. For fixed types, the shallower the depth, the fewer structures are needed and the lower the cost. This can be seen as having better value for money. Vice Chairman Holst stated that Korea's waters are not deep, so offshore wind power can be built in a fixed manner which can help reduce cost. Surrounded by the sea on 3 sides, Korea has a favorable environment for wind power generation. Due to the inherent constraints such as small territory and high population density, Korean energy has been forced to be dependent on other countries. But when we turn to the vast ocean, it becomes much more competitive, and offshore wind power will become a big asset for Korea in times to come. We look forward to a successful future of Korea's offshore wind power generation. We'll be back with more informative content on the next episode of Knowledge Spoon.